Testing 1, 2. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that, Kate. Surprised her. Surprise. The subcommittee will come to order. I welcome the witnesses and subcommittee members to today's hearing, and everyone who has participated in the subcommittee understands this is not a bipartisan committee. This is a nonpartisan committee, and we'll continue to operate in that vein. We've got 12 important legislative proposals to consider today. Sorry, please be seated. Yeah. Sorry about that. I got all excited about legislation. I actually do. I'm a much bigger nerd than I thought I was. It's important to note that not all of the proposals will move forward in today's process, are in the process, and we hold legislative hearings to learn from the VA and other groups about their views on the bills and ensure members are making informed decisions, and when we do or do not mark them up. We value the insight provided by these stakeholders and agencies as an essential part of this process. A number of these proposals seek to improve education programs for America's veterans and ensure that the GI Bill dollars are being used responsibly. I specifically want to highlight 3 of my bills that are on today's agenda. My first bill would modernize the requirement for vet success on campus officers and allow them to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in a relevant field of study instead of a master's degree. This change would allow our VSOCs to service more student veterans on campus and possibly allow for services to be provided to nearby student veterans on other campuses. Other bills that I've introduced would allow individuals participating in the on-the-job training or apprenticeship to receive an increased amount of educational assistance paid during months 6 through 12 of the apprenticeship from 80 to 90%. This is a logical way to promote non-traditional ways for veterans to explore career opportunities. My last bill would establish a partial claim program that would bring the VA Home Loan Program on par with other programs such as FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. This partial claim authority would be a step in the loss mitigation process before the VAST program, which I have deep-seated concerns about. In the current high-interest environment that we're living in, created by some terrible economic policies, my bill would allow a veteran who is behind on their mortgage to get a loan from the federal government, without having to enter into loan modification that would make their mortgage payments too costly to afford. The legislation would allow VA to provide assistance without purchasing the entire property, which is a key difference from the proposed VAST expansion. Many of you have heard previously me express my frustration with the idea of the VA taking responsibility for as many as 60,000 mortgages that would put the American taxpayers on the hook if they're foreclosed to the tune of $16 billion, which could potentially destroy the second best program that has been created under the Veterans Administration, and that is the VA Home Loan Guarantee, the first one, of course, being the GI Bill. My bill would allow VA to provide limited assistance and include mechanisms to encourage repayment as soon as the veterans are able. I do look forward to working with the minority and my friends in the Senate to see if we can find a better way to help these veterans without destroying the VA Home Loan Program. At this hearing, we're also going to discuss legislation to allow National Guard and reservists who are activated while in school to receive a grade instead of an incomplete, provided they can reach an agreement with their school and professors. Additional bills that will be considered would address education, home loan, and homelessness, which is my ranking member's #1 legislative priority. And I have reservations about some of the proposals on the agenda today, and the witnesses' testimony and questions from members will hopefully address some of these issues so that we can make informed decisions about whether or not to move these forward in the legislative process. We look forward to hearing from the members who have introduced these proposals, as well as our witnesses on how we can continue to improve these bills and better the lives of our veterans. I now yield to my friend, Ranking Member Levin from the great state of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you to my friend, Chairman Van Orden, for holding this legislative hearing on 12 pieces of legislation, and also congratulations on a successful jump at Normandy, commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I want to start out by highlighting a few of the bills on the agenda that will ensure equity and benefits for service members, veterans, spouses, and dependents, expand much-needed benefits for homeless veterans, and increase the post-9/11 GI Bill books and supply stipend. First, I'd like to thank Ranking Member Takano for his partnership on the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2024. This important piece of legislation would ensure National Guard and Reservist service members receive post-9/11 GI Bill eligibility for every day spent in uniform. This means that every day conducting operations, training, attending military schools, conducting weekend drill and annual training requirements, or responding to national disasters would count towards earning post-9/11 GI Bill educational benefits. Additionally, homelessness continues to be a top priority of mine, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. We must take a comprehensive approach to address the underlying needs of each individual veteran until every veteran has a place to call home. Ranking Member Takano, Representative Waters, and I partnered on the End Veteran Homelessness Act that will allow thousands more veterans to be served in the HUD VA Supportive Housing Program. This crucial piece of legislation will drastically reduce the number of homeless veterans and increase the utilization of HUD-VASH vouchers. Next, Representative Clyburn's VA Housing Loan Forever Act will address historic racial inequities faced by veterans. This significant piece of legislation would grant eligibility to the VA Home Loan Program for military family members of World War II, Korean, and Vietnam War veterans who were promised benefits based on their service, but unable to actually use these benefits due to redlining and discriminatory practices. We have a moral obligation to make this right, and this will have a huge impact on this generation and subsequent generations for home ownership. Lastly, Representative Vasquez's bill would increase the books and supplies stipend that veterans receive each academic year. This stipend has not been increased since the post-9/11 GI Bill benefits were enacted in 2008. Many veterans can't stretch the yearly books and supplies stipend to cover all their needs. I've heard this frequently. And they often end up paying out of pocket to ensure they have everything they need. This bill would help to ensure that no longer happens and that our student veterans have the books, supplies, and equipment they need to be successful. Moving on, we're considering the VA Home Loan Reform Act. I was surprised to see this legislation on the VA Home Loan Program instead of Representative DeLuzio and Senator Tester's bill, H.R. 7898, the Veterans Housing Stability Act of 2024 that was introduced in April of this year. I want to be clear, I support the intent of providing VA with additional tools to help veterans avoid foreclosure. However, Representative DeLuzio's bill is much more comprehensive. It would provide authority for the VA to request moratoriums on foreclosures in the event of a national emergency and establish a partial claim program for up to 30% of the unpaid principal. I'm concerned that the bill on the agenda is meant to replace the vast portion of the loss mitigation waterfall, something I can't support. We should be adding to VA's toolbox, not taking tools away. Finally, I'm pleased we're considering a bill that focuses on allowing more post-secondary vocational institutions to offer hybrid learning. However, I do have some concerns around the drafting of the bill to ensure we're not opening up the aperture for bad actors to take advantage of veterans' GI Bill benefits. As I've said before, the subcommittee has a treasure trove of bills that are ready for consideration, so I'd welcome more legislative hearings this year, and I stand ready to work with the chairman on his priorities. Also, I look forward to our upcoming events, such as the subcommittee markup and the oversight hearing on homelessness programs later this month. Chairman Van Orden and I share this as a top priority. We still have so much to accomplish. The calendar keeps getting shorter. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I'll now introduce the witness panel. Our first witness is Mr. John Bell, the Executive Director of Loan Guarantee Services at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Bell is accompanied by Mr. Joe Garcia, Executive Director of Education Services, Mr. James Ruhlman, Deputy Director of Education Services, and Ms. Jill Albanese, Director of Clinical Operations. I ask the witnesses in the first panel to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I ask the witnesses today to have your seats, please. You guys know how this works. I don't ask you to respect the 5-minute rule. You're going to do it, or I'll shut the microphone off, and I hold myself to the same standard. Mr. Bell, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting us here today to discuss pending legislation. Joining me today are Joe Garcia, Executive Director, and James Ruhlman, Deputy Director for Program Management, both from Education Service at Veterans Benefits Administration, and Jill Albanese, Director of Clinical Operations and Senior Advisor to the Executive Director for the VA Homeless Programs Office at the Veterans Health Administration. While VA's views on all of the bills are detailed in my written testimony, including areas of concern and support, I would like to highlight several bills in my opening remarks. First, VA highly supports the unnumbered bill that would authorize an annual increase of the amount payable for books and supplies. The current amount has remained unchanged for 15 years, and with the cost of books increasing each year, we believe that books and supplies stipends should also increase to lower out-of-pocket expenses for our beneficiaries. VA also supports the unnumbered bill which would increase the monthly housing allowance from 80 to 90% during the second period for beneficiaries participating in on-the-job training and apprenticeship programs. With the cost of living expenses steadily rising, this increase to the housing allowance will ease some of the financial strain on our veterans and allow them to focus more on on gaining the skills needed to acquire meaningful employment. Regarding the Modernizing the Veterans On-Campus Experience Act of 2024, VA does not support this bill unless amended. VA requests additional clarification on the definition of employees authorized to provide on-campus services, given the specific educational requirements needed to provide counseling services. We also request clarity on the bill's restriction to provide case management services to no more than 25 individuals at any one time, as it will limit the VSOC's counselor's ability to provide necessary outreach and walk-in services to student veterans, especially in serving multiple campuses. VA strongly supports efforts to end veteran homelessness, and as such, we support the End Veteran Homeless Act of 2024. This legislation would expand veterans' eligibility for a HUD-VASH program and allow more veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness to obtain permanent housing. Regarding the Housing Loan Forever Act, VA supports this bill if amended. We believe VA's proposed amendments to limit a legatee's benefit to a one-time purchase or construction loan for a first-time homebuyer will not jeopardize the objectives of the bill and will still make a meaningful difference for the families of veterans who served prior to 1978 and did not use their earned VA home loan benefit. Finally, VA appreciates the subcommittee's continued support to provide VA with additional flexibilities to help veterans experiencing financial difficulties retain their homes, and as such, we support Section 2 of VA Home Loan Program Reform Act. However, we do not support the partial claim program outlined in Section 3 of the bill due to concerns that it would compromise veterans' long-term financial standing and pose significant implementation challenges given the short-lived nature of the program. VA also does not support Section 4 of the bill because we believe that VA has, in announcing yesterday our strategy to address the changing real estate marketplace. VA announced a temporary policy to allow veterans to pay buyer-broker fees when purchasing a home using their earned VA home loan benefit. We also noted that we will propose a permanent policy through rulemaking when full impacts of the class action lawsuit and the National Association of Realtors rule changes are fully understood. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. We appreciate the congressional intent and welcome the opportunity to work closely with Congress on all of the bills on today's agenda. My colleagues and I are prepared to respond to any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. I am now going to recognize Ranking Member Levin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Albanese, thank you for your testimony in support of the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2024. Bill, I'm proud to co-lead with Ranking Members Takano and Waters. This bill will modernize the HUD-VASH program by expanding eligibility and making it more flexible. How will the expansion of eligibility for HUD-VASH and other authorities in this bill close the gap between unused vouchers and the veterans who are still experiencing homelessness?
Thank you very much for that question, Ranking Member Levin, and we really do appreciate this very much. So to answer your question, we know that there are many veterans. In fact, we know that there are thousands of veterans out there who are homeless, who could benefit from having a HUD-VASH voucher, but right now they are not eligible for that HUD-VASH voucher. By expanding the pool of veterans that can receive these vouchers, we can get those veterans off the streets now and permanently. What we know about HUD-VASH is that veterans don't return to homelessness when they have a permanent subsidy like HUD-VASH. So this really truly would end someone's homelessness. I heard recently that there was a veteran who was living in his car. He had a full-time job, was working every day, and therefore was deemed not needing case management. That veteran's not eligible for a HUD-VASH voucher, even though there were unused vouchers available at that local medical center. That veteran, if this bill were passed, could get a HUD-VASH voucher and again, would end his homelessness permanently.
Thank you for that. How much does VA estimate this bill will cost?
There's no cost.
No cost.
Yeah, we will
That's good.
use,
Guys hear
we're
that?
not asking for additional vouchers. We will use the existing resources that we have to, we're just asking for more flexibility, really, to use the vouchers the way we want to.
Appreciate that. I want to turn to the VA home loan program. VA recently updated its policy to temporarily allow veteran buyers using the VA home loan program to negotiate and pay their own buyer broker fee within certain safeguards. Veterans were previously not allowed to pay their own buyer broker fees when they bought a home through the VA home loan program, but a recent legal settlement will likely lead to a greater expectation that home buyers pay their own buyer broker fees, putting veterans at a disadvantage in securing a home. Mr. Bell, I will ask this of you. When does VA plan to make this new rule permanent?
Sir, we are working on the regulation now. We wanted to make sure that as implementation gets closer for the NAR settlement in August, that we're able to take that feedback from the public and then make a fully informed decision about whether or not there are maximum fees that should be charged for veterans to make sure that they are still able to be competitive, but also get that public feedback on how we should move forward.
And at a minimum, could you commit to not rescinding this temporary prohibition and returning to former policy?
Yes, sir.
Appreciate that. Mr. Garcia, I'll turn to you. I think we agree veterans should never have to worry that their education is being jeopardized or that they're going to be harmed by a predatory institution. I've worked on passing legislation to ensure proper oversight measures for the VA and to restore education benefits to defrauded veterans. The Veterans Education and Technical Skills Opportunity Act would change the definition of institutions of higher education for the purposes of independent study, specifically to include post-secondary vocational institutions. My question for you, sir, does this bill provide adequate standards, in your view, to qualify to participate in student financial assistance programs that are authorized by Title IV?
So we have concerns about that because the way the language is now, it is qualified to participate versus approved and participate. So Education Department really are the subject matter experts when it comes to Title IV approval. And so the way the bill is written now, we would then have to determine who's qualified, right? Again, that's not our expertise. So the concern is you bring us into it, you may have two agencies reaching different conclusions on being qualified. Why not stick with the language now for Title IV, approved and participate, versus determining somebody who's qualified? That'd be the concern.
Got it. I appreciate that, Mr. Garcia. One more question for you. By expanding the definition of independent study to allow vocational schools to provide online learning, would the bill potentially open up the aperture for bad actors?
So with the state-approving agencies, what they do now, we believe that would not be an issue because you don't want to prevent good programs from coming in. You already have the safeguards to prevent bad programs from being there. So we think there's more benefit to it with the existing controls already in place with us and the state-approving agencies.
Out of time, he's about to hit that gavel, so yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. The chair now recognizes Ms. Ramirez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. I've had an opportunity to hear from a number of you, so it's good to see you again. And it's important as we're discussing a number of bills that aim to improve the lives of our veterans, including bills that would help prevent homelessness, expand opportunities to obtain housing, improve educational benefits, and address educational equity, that we get into a little bit more of the substance of it. I want to start with Ms. Albanese. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Close enough, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm big on that. I wanted to ask you, we know that the flexibilities integrated in the emergency housing voucher program have worked to reduce homelessness and get people in stable housing during the pandemic. And so my question to you is, how does the End Veteran Homeless Act adopt some of those flexibilities? And why are they so necessary to our ability to get veterans quickly moved into permanent housing?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So what we found during the pandemic, that the more flexibilities we had, the more veterans we could house. Having these additional flexibilities with the HUD-VASH program, it's going to allow our case managers to provide services to those veterans who need it the most, but still provide the HUD-VASH voucher to veterans who maybe don't need intensive case management services. That's going to allow us to house more veterans within the HUD-VASH program. It's also going to allow us to move veterans who maybe were in another housing program, maybe another assistance program, into HUD-VASH if they need the case management and if that's a more appropriate program.
Got it. Additionally, I think I've mentioned this before, and actually this question can be to you or it can be to Mr. Bell, but I used to run a homeless shelter. I did that. I was there for about 13 years. I know I look very young for that, but it happened. And I worked with a lot of veterans who were experiencing homelessness, who oftentimes, the time that it took to help them move into permanent housing really had an impact on their mental health. So I wanted to ask you or Mr. Bell, do you think that the End Veteran Homeless Act will also serve as another tool to really help reduce suicide among our veterans? I mean, we know, for example, that homeless veterans are 186% higher rate than non-homeless veterans in committing suicide. So I'm interested in your take on that, Mr. Bell or Ms. Albanese.
So I will say absolutely it will. We know that homelessness or risk of homelessness is absolutely a high risk for suicide. What this bill will do is it will also allow us to serve more veterans and house more veterans. It will also allow us to serve more veterans who are at risk of homelessness. And we know that that is a risk factor for suicide.
Yeah, thank you. And then I guess one of my last questions here, this one, I want to move and shift a little bit into the VA Home Loan Reform Act. Mr. Bell, this one's for you. The Veteran Affairs Servicing Purchase Program is set to start at the end of May, and through VASP, as the last option, the VA will purchase qualified veterans' modified loans from their servicer. The VA Home Loan Reform Act would create partial claims program. So my question to you is, what is the VA doing to ensure that those veterans who were forced to take much higher interest rates when the COVID provisions ended and before the VASP implementation are taken care of?
Thank you for your question, and this speaks directly to the reason why we needed VASP, and that was a unique set of borrowers, of veterans that went through CARES Act, had forbearances. They were at 2.5% to 3% interest rate, and we needed a place where we could solve for the past due payments, but we needed payment reduction, and payment reduction is what allows VASP to work. So we're hoping that as we get over this one occurrence, that there are other means in our loss mitigation waterfall that our servicers can use to help veterans as they move, if they do go into default, that we can help them succeed. So that's why it's the last option in that waterfall, but it's all about payment reduction. They needed a time and place payment reduction when 2.5% interest rate is what they have now, 2.5 to 3, and rates are at 7%. So,
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
In accordance with Committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Vasquez from California,
New Mexico.
New Mexico, oh my gosh, you know what, I'm going to haze myself immediately following this committee hearing. From New Mexico will be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Hearing no objections, we will proceed. Mr. Vasquez from the great state of New Mexico, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, We do have a saying, don't California my New Mexico, so I'm going to hold you to that. Although I love the great state of California. Distinguished members of the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on the Economic Opportunity for allowing me to testify today in support of my bill, the Veterans Education Assistant Adjustment Act. So thank you to our witnesses that are here as well joining us. Our veterans have made an extraordinary sacrifice for our country, and it's our duty to support them as they transition to civilian life and pursue their educational goals. The post-9/11 GI Bill has been a key part of our promise to veterans, offering them the educational benefits they need to reach their academic and their career goals post-service. However, to maintain the effectiveness of this vital program, we need to make sure the financial support it provides keeps up with inflation and a changing economy. Currently, the financial support for books, supplies, and equipment provided under the post-9/11 GI Bill stands at $1,000 per year. This amount, unchanged over a decade, no longer reflects the rising costs of educational materials and living expenses. My bill, the Veterans Education Assistance Adjustment Act, would increase the maximum stipend for books and supplies to $1,400 per year. Additionally, it introduces a cost of living adjustment each year, ensuring that the financial support keeps pace with inflation and the ever-increasing costs that our veterans and their families face today. Books and other educational supplies can be a barrier for many students. 2008 was the last time an adjustment was made. Alarmingly, $1,000 in 2008 is equal to $1,450 today. Veterans should not be required to subsidize that additional cost with their limited incomes. As the costs of materials rise, our veterans deserve the necessary financial support to continue their education. My district, New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, which one of the highest rates of service per capita, including the highest rates amongst Native Americans, is home to almost 50,000 veterans, and New Mexico is home to 3,700 veterans currently enrolled in Veteran Educational Assistant benefits, and I'm honored to come before this committee today to advocate for them and the benefits they rightfully deserve for serving our country, as well as all the veterans enrolled in these benefits in all of our districts across the country. It has been well over a decade since anyone took into account the cost of education supplies for veterans, and that's why I'm here today to advocate for my bill that will provide veterans with the financial stability that they need to focus on their studies as they transition to civilian life. We need to do better to assist the heroes who served our country. The cost of books should not be a barrier to education and to a future career. I ask that the chairman, ranking member, and members of this subcommittee support my legislation to increase this crucial stipend for veterans' education assistance. Thank you all for considering my bill. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vasquez, I want to thank you for coming, and I appreciate this bill. There is precedent set already through the vocational rehabilitation program where they pay for books and supplies. And what I suggest we do is look at how that program is administered and the cost and see if we can apply some type of formula to this, because you're right. We should not have our veterans who served our country subsidizing their own education. One of the primary reasons some people do join the military is to have educational benefits. We're in a recruiting crisis now. So I appreciate you coming here tremendously. So a tradition in the subcommittee is when we ever have anybody come talk is that you're given a gift, and it is Wisconsin cheese. So Matthew just left, and if he's not back in time, if you want to take off, that will be delivered to your office, and you are always welcome here, and I appreciate your heart for veterans, sir.
Chairman, you know the way to my heart. I appreciate it.
All right, the chair now recognizes himself in the third person for 5 minutes. Mr. Bell, you were here before we were discussing VASP, and I asked you specifically if all things went to pot, would the Veterans Affairs Administration be foreclosing on homes? And you said yes. Everything, this whole waterfall, doesn't work out, you said that the VA would foreclose on veterans' homes. And then I had the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Dennis McDonough, a man that I respect tremendously, and I asked him, in what universe do you see the Veterans Affairs Administration foreclosing on a veteran home who was incapable of paying their mortgage after we go through this whole thing? And he said, there isn't one. So the Secretary of Veterans Affairs said that there's no way that the VA would be foreclosing on homes, and you said that they would if all of these schemes don't work out. So who's running the Veterans Affairs Committee? Mr. Bell, you, or Secretary McDonough?
Sir, of course, the Secretary runs the VA, but what I will say is we're doing everything that we can, including talking about the legislation that we have presented today, as well as the VAST program, and making sure that every veteran is given the opportunity
I understand,
to
Mr.
not
Bell.
foreclose.
So are you telling me that you inadvertently delivered the wrong testimony to this committee under oath, or you did that on purpose because your testimony and the Secretary of Veterans Affairs testimony are incongruent?
No, sir. The answer is, again, I stand by that there are certainly times, unfortunately, where we have to foreclose on veterans.
So do I need to ask the Secretary to revise his testimony, or do I need to ask you to revise yours? This is an incredibly important issue because we're talking about destroying the second best program that has ever been developed.
Sir, I will take that back to the department.
Okay, that is a completely unacceptable answer, sir. You gave the exact opposite answer to the Secretary about a program that could potentially, a program within a program that could destroy it and not allow our veterans to purchase homes. So again, this speaks to the fact that I do not think that this VASP program has been thought out very well. Our second panel, we're going to be talking about the VA Housing Loan Forever Act of 2024, right?
Yes, sir.
So how many folks would be eligible for this, the expansion of the VA Home Loan Program?
It is an unknown, sir, and that's one of the things that we need to work through with the bill is to understand exactly what veterans are eligible.
Okay. I read your testimony, it's great. So I just have a couple questions here.
Yes, sir.
So are you telling me the Veterans Affairs, that the VA is willing to foreclose on the home of a World War II veteran's granddaughter who is given these benefits through an expansion of the program?
Again, sir, there is we expend every opportunity within VA
I get
with
it.
our servicers to to try not to foreclose on any veterans. And what I am before you today to speak about is for our continued support in trying to solve an issue where we do not
Mr.
want
Bell, I
40,000
understand
veterans.
your intent explicitly. I also understand the fact that you've decided to extend this moratorium until December. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if your ship is watertight and everything is good to go and you're gonna launch it out to everybody, like you told me you were prepared to do so before, why would you have to extend anything? Why can't you push go?
Sir, there is one thing for us to be able to take in or to establish the program. That happened on May 31st, which was what was promised. Whether or not a servicer's technical is ready from a technical standpoint to transfer those loans to us, that is why we needed the additional time, because we don't want to leave any veteran behind that we can
Mr.
help.
Bell, no one wants to leave a veteran behind, but I'm afraid you're going to destroy something that is the second best program that has ever been created by the VA because you have not thought this program through. I am out of time. Before I dismiss this panel, I feel compelled again to express my deepest reservation about what the Veterans Affairs Committee is potentially doing. And I mean, if we look at these things, the application of this VASP, the implementation of this, and the $16 billion that we're signing up for, and now we're talking about potentially expanding VA loan home guarantees to an unknown number of people, which you articulated very well, that your concerns. I am unwilling to allow that to take place on my watch. And no one wants a homeless veteran. It's Ranking Member Levin's priority. It's my priority. But if we do this and we destroy the program in its entirety trying to save it, the amount of homeless veterans we're going to have is going to be exponentially more. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I feel like we're taking that off-ramp with your VASP program. And I just want that noted again for the record. I am not impugning your reputation, sir, or saying that your heart is not in the right place, any one of you. I understand that. We're trying to get to the same place, but the route you're choosing to take is gonna destroy something that is good. I do need to note that the written statement of Mr. Bell will be entered into the record. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I appreciate it greatly. You are excused, and I hope that you stick around for the second panel. Can we in-panel the second panel, please?
Here they come.
Oh, wow.
Look at that.
Look at that. We're all sitting here staring at each other and wondering who's... On our second panel, we're going to wind up, if you just stay standing for a sec. On our second panel, we're going to hear from the following witnesses. Dr. Jan Del Signor, President of the National Association of Veterans Program Administrators. Mr. Kevin O'Neill, Senior Employment and Education Policy Associate at the American Legion. Ms. Karen Kreutzinger? What is it? Kreutzinger? Okay, Kreutzinger. Powell, CEO of Flat Home Loans on behalf of the Mortgage Bankers Association. Mr. Marquis. You know what? I get a Marquess in my district. You're Marquis. Mr. Marquis Bearfield, Assistant National Legislative Director at Disabled American Veterans, and Mr. Richard Brookshire, CEO and founder of Black Veterans Project. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses to raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Dr. Del Signor, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member 11, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this hearing on pending legislation. My name is Dr. Jan Del-Signor, President of the National Association of Veterans Program Administrators, NAPA. NAPA's membership includes over 400 public and private colleges and universities across the nation that represents over 530,000 student veterans. Most of our membership is comprised of school certifying officials, SCOs, and school administrators who administer or oversee GI Bill benefits for our student veterans. NAPA has served as the voice of advocacy for veterans in higher education since its founding in 1975. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the pending legislation topics that pertain to the institutions of higher learning, IHLs, and how previous outcomes have affected our military-connected students and veterans. NAPA would like to address the following topics: the Student Veteran Debt Relief Act of 2024 and Reforming Education for Veterans Act. One of our main concerns is how Public Law 116.315, Section 1019 has been implemented by the VA, causing undue hardship on student veterans and schools alike. When the VA determines a GI Bill recipient was paid Chapter 33 benefits incorrectly, those overpayment letters are sent to the institution. NAPA members are reporting those overpayment letters include tuition payments as far back as 2010. Per the SEO handbook, the institution is required to retain student records for 3 years. The institution has difficulty understanding the reason for this 14-year-old debt since SEOs no longer have access to the VA One's technology or even the student's records per federal guidelines, or why it has taken the VA over 14 years to determine a debt. Sometimes a student and/or graduate is unaware the VA has rescinded their GI Bill approval. These students are placed into collections causing unforeseen consequences, such as negatively impacting their credit rating and personal financial portfolios. These actions are unknown to the student veteran as the school can no longer contact them. Not all student debt has been from years past, however, when the VA has rescinded a student veteran's GI Bill approval. NAPA had one member report that both the school and student received overpayment letters prior to the student's final semester. This created a huge debt for the student where he had to return thousands of dollars of his housing allowance back to the VA due to a VA clerical error, but was then facing no housing support to complete his final semester in school and graduate. In addition, he now owed his school thousands of dollars in tuition for the monies the VA took back that were previously approved under his benefit. This action was not only unfair to that student veteran, but placed him into extreme financial hardship and dire straits. Our next topic concerns the Reforming Education for Veterans Act. Currently, schools are required to follow guidance from the Department of Education, ED, and the DoD, Department of Defense, in how to administer to students when or if they are activated while attending the institution. The Department of Ed currently has an outline, and the Department of Defense instruction, DoD 1322.25, provides guidance that schools must adhere to. NAPA recommends an amendment to reflect current procedures followed by the Department of Ed and the Department of Defense for when service members must withdraw or take a leave of absence to perform military duty. Public Law 117.333 added a time restraint upon the SEO to prepare for a VA compliance survey. The compliance survey change currently limits institutions to less than 10 business days to prepare for a review once notified is received. NAPA members are reporting that there is not enough time to prepare for a VA compliance survey. Many schools are not receiving a reasonable amount of notification. Current legislation is maximum of 10 business days to prepare, organize, and upload the amount of documentation required. SEOs are working from the time they receive notification until the day of the site visit to gather the substantial amount of required documentation for the VA compliance survey, regardless of federal holidays, weekends, school-mandated events, or personal life events. Recently, one school reported they were notified on the Thursday prior to Memorial Day for a compliance survey at their institution for the following Wednesday. That was a 3-day business day notification over a federal holiday when the school was closed. Centralized schools are reporting that they are being notified for different compliance survey locations on the same day. These centralized schools are categorized as one institution under the Department of Education, but these surveys often overlap, creating triple duty or more for the SEO at times. Many SEOs are veterans themselves and are reporting they received notification for a VA compliance survey on the day they have an appointment at the VA hospital. then there's a conflict and they cannot reschedule. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions regarding these topics.
Thank you, Dr. Del Signor. Your testimony will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. O'Neill, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, on behalf of National Commander Daniel J.C. Hafer and our 1.6 million members, the American Legion thanks you for the opportunity to testify on important legislation affecting veterans and their families. Before we delve into legislation, I want to express my admiration for the subcommittee's unwavering commitment to ensuring that veterans and their families receive the support they deserve in all facets of life. The legislation we are here to discuss today is a testament to this commitment, reflecting a strong desire to provide veterans with every available opportunity. These opportunities, often life-changing, can transform the lives of veterans in ways that were once unimaginable. My own life was significantly transformed by the benefits made available to me following my military career. I remember sitting with a recruiter in 2008 at the age of 19 and hearing about the array of benefits that I would receive as a result of my military service. Even at that time, despite having no desire to obtain a degree, I found it astonishing that the GI Bill would allow veterans to attend college with little to no cost out of pocket. It took time for me to develop the desire to attend college, but when I finally did, I felt extreme gratitude for those who determined that veterans are deserving of these benefits. I feel the same gratitude now for this subcommittee as it continues to expand opportunities for veterans and their families. Keeping in line with the theme of education, the American Legion would like to express its support for 2 bills that will greatly improve education and training outcomes for veterans. The first bill that we would like to address is the Warriors to Workforce Act. The Warriors to Workforce Act, a bill that the American Legion fully supports, aims to increase the monthly housing allowance for veterans from 80% to 90% of the standard rate. This adjustment is designed to support veterans' continued participation in apprenticeship and on-the-job training programs, and to reduce dropout rates that often occur when their housing allowance decreases after the program's first 6 months. If passed, this bill will be a significant step towards ensuring that veterans have the necessary support to transition into the civilian workforce. We firmly believe that no veteran should be forced to discontinue their education due to housing costs. The American Legion commends Chairman Van Orden for his leadership in the efforts of this subcommittee to improve education and training outcomes for veterans. The second bill that the American Legion strongly supports is H.R. 7543, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2024. From safeguarding our borders and capitals to providing pandemic aid and supporting local law enforcement, National Guard and Reserve service members have been increasingly called upon to face unique challenges. They often make significant sacrifices, leaving their families and civilian employers for extended periods of time, sometimes even accepting substantial pay cuts. Yet, despite all we ask of them, they often are denied fundamental benefits of their service, particularly the GI Bill. The American Legion believes that every day in uniform counts. National Guard and Reserve service members who serve alongside their active duty counterparts deserve GI Bill parity. The American Legion would like to thank Ranking Member Levin and Takano for their leadership on this front and that of this subcommittee for consistently advocating for GI Bill parity. Finally, the American Legion would like to express its support for legislation not related to education, and that is the VA Housing Loan Forever Act. Specifically, the American Legion supports transferring housing loan benefits to spouses and biological or legally adopted children. There is no option for service members and veterans to transfer VA home loan benefits to their spouse or child. By enabling and supporting the families of our service members and veterans, we are supporting the military community as a whole. We thank Congressman Clyburn and his staff for their commitment to service members, veterans, and their families. In closing, the American Legion would like to thank Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of this subcommittee for allowing us to be here today, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. O'Neill's written testimony will be entered into the hearing record, my fellow Legionnaire. Ms. Kutzinger-Powell, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the MBA. My name is Karen Kreuziger-Powell. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer at Flat Branch Home Loans, an independent residential mortgage lender headquartered in Missouri and licensed in 38 states. I have extensive experience originating, securitizing, and servicing VA home loan program mortgages, and am honored to appear before this panel. MBA appreciates the focus of today's hearing on proposed legislation aimed at authorizing a permanent partial claim program. This program is designed to give our nation's heroes loss mitigation options comparable to those in other federal housing programs. The VA Home Loan Program is a significant benefit earned by our veterans through their sacrifice and service. MBA recognizes the need to make this program more accessible, operationally efficient, flexible, and competitive. This is particularly crucial during times of individual crisis for veterans and their families, and it's important this benefit is not diminished. That's why I want to emphasize MBA's strong concern that the VA funding fee should not be used for expenses unrelated to the home loan program. MBA has worked closely with committee staff on the topic of partial claims, and we are pleased to offer recommendations aimed at improving the proposed legislation. The VA may require additional resources from Congress to implement these suggested program improvements. MBA welcomes legislation that authorizes a permanent partial claim for the VA home loan program. A partial claim is a standard, simple, and time-tested foreclosure prevention solution available to borrowers in other federal housing programs, but one that is missing from the VA's loss mitigation toolkit. It allows a borrower who has resolved a financial hardship to move missed payments to the back of the loan without interest following a period of forbearance. This helps borrowers get back on track with regular mortgage payments or pursue a modification for a more affordable payment. Despite the introduction of the VA's newest loss mitigation program, known as VASP, MBA believes veteran homeowners facing temporary financial hardship deserve access to partial claims to reinstate their loans and remain in their homes. Access to both of these solutions will provide struggling borrowers with a more durable set of loss mitigation options to preserve affordable homeownership. We are, however, concerned that certain provisions of the current bill text, such as the repayment plan, could adversely affect veteran homeowners, mortgage servicers, and the VA. As drafted, this legislation adds hurdles that may negatively impact borrower benefits. These changes might be motivated by a desire to generate revenue through interest income, but VA will recoup the initial outlay most of the time, as a partial claim requires repayment at payoff, refinance, or maturity of the first lien mortgage. No other government program requires repayment with interest, and we urge amendments to the bill to achieve parity with other federal housing programs. MBA appreciates your consideration of these recommendations. Our association and its members will continue to work with the agency, this committee, and other key stakeholders to ensure veterans and their families have access to more affordable, sustainable homeownership opportunities. The final topic I want to highlight today concerns the settlement agreement of the National Association of Realtors to resolve various class action lawsuits alleging antitrust violations. If approved, changes could impact decisions by sellers to cover buyer agent commission fees. VA's regulations prohibit veterans from paying fees or commissions to real estate agents in relation to a VA home loan program. This prohibition puts veteran borrowers at a severe disadvantage as they are prohibited from compensating real estate agents who guide them through the home buying process. MBA is pleased that the VA has taken temporary measures to address the problem. We urge the VA to permanently amend its regulations. Once again, MBA appreciates the opportunity to comment on the issues impacting the VA home loan program and the specific legislation before the subcommittee today. We value partnering with Congress and the VA to help veterans utilize their earned benefit to achieve home ownership. MBA looks forward to continuing to work with the subcommittee to forge practical solutions and provide the VA with the necessary resources to implement changes and improve the home loan program. I look forward to answering any questions you may have on this or any of the proposed legislation.
Thank you. The written statement of Ms. Kreuziger-Powell will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Bearfield, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting DAV to testify at today's hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity to consider the legislation for discussion this afternoon. We have provided our written statement for all of the bills under consideration today, and we are pleased to provide our views on a few of the bills impacting DAV members, their families, and survivors. Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of the fiscal year 2024, there were as many as 41,000 veterans homeless in the United States. According to the VA, a key priority is to place veterans experiencing homelessness into permanent housing. They will accomplish this by using HUD rental assistance vouchers for privately owned housing to assist veterans who are experiencing homelessness. This collaborative program between VA and HUD combines housing vouchers with VA supportive services to help veterans who are homeless and their families find and sustain permanent housing. VA case managers may connect these veterans with supportive services such as health care, mental health treatment, and substance use counseling to help them in their recovery process and with their ability to maintain housing in their community. For these reasons, DAV is pleased to support H.R. 8560, the End Veterans Homelessness Act. Many veterans have experienced post-deployment conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries, and substance use disorders. These conditions from military service often make veterans' participation in the workforce difficult or impossible and can make them more prone to homelessness. We appreciate the fact that this legislation would have case managers prioritize assistance to vulnerably homeless veterans, especially those with service-related conditions. We urge Congress, to authorize the HUD-VASH vouchers and require the VA to provide effective case management necessary for homeless veterans to stay housed. Another bill DAV fully supports is H.R. 7543, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act. Currently, for Guard and Reserve members to be eligible for post-9/11 GI Bill benefits, they must have served at least 90 aggregate days on active duty after September 10, 2001, or served 30 continuous days on active duty after September 10, 2001, and were honorably discharged for a service-connected disability. With the passage of this legislation, National Guard and Reserve members will be eligible to earn post-9/11 GI Bill education benefits for every day spent in service to this country. This legislation would address the inequity between all duty statuses. We encourage Congress to remove barriers to continued education and ensure full access and use of these earned benefits. Mr. Chairman, DAV is pleased to support your bill, H.R. 7920, the Agriculture Grants for Veterans Education and Training Services Act, or the Ag-Vets Act. For individuals who would like to pursue an opportunity to work in agricultural fields, this grant program would go a long way in helping them achieve the goal. Agriculture is a broad and diverse industry that offers a wide range of jobs and opportunities. There are many jobs in the agriculture that are in high demand, including supportive positions like truck drivers, construction workers, engineers, and mechanics. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the agriculture industry employed over 876,000 people in 2021, and overall employment of agricultural workers is projected not to change from 2021 to 2031. These grants are intended to support the establishment and enhancement of farming and ranching opportunities for veterans, as well as to be used for training, education, curriculum development, and other activities that increase veterans' participation in agriculture. Finally, Mr. Chairman, DAV also supports the following bills: H.R. 7896, the Vets Opportunity Act; H.R. 8514, to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide for an annual increase in stipend for book supplies, equipment, and other educational costs under post-9/11 education assistance programs of the Department of Veterans Affairs; H.R. 8592, H.R. 8627, H.R. 8646, and finally, H.R. 8661. This concludes my testimony, and I welcome any questions that you or members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bearfield. I, too, am a member of the Disabled Veterans of America, the DAV. Thank you very much. The written statement of Mr. Bearfield will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Brookshire, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member 11, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of Black Veterans Project, thank you for the opportunity to share our views on H.R. 8607, the VA Housing Loan Forever Act. Black Veterans Project is a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit that advances research, litigation, and narrative storytelling to actualize racial equity and reparative justice in and out of uniform. Core to our mission is making reparations for descendants of Black World War II veterans and their families real in our lifetime. June 22nd marks 80 years since the GI Bill was initially crafted and passed into law in 1944. This past week, we venerated the heroic actions of American troops on the shores of Normandy. Today, we must remember an uncomfortable truth, that the horrors of Jim Crow segregation were reinforced by our government's administration of the GI Bill's housing and education benefits programs meant to honor the contributions of the greatest generation. The sacrifices of over 1 million Black GIs were met with redlining, with racial covenants, discriminatory practices in banking and collegiate admissions, and broader divestments tantamount to economic lynching. Collectively, these policies coalesced to ensure diminutive numbers of Black veterans and military families could access nor utilize their VA home loans. VA home loan programs set millions of white veterans and their families on a path to home ownership and to the accumulation of generational wealth, bolstering and transforming the American middle class. The opportunity to right this particular historical wrong is overdue, and the time to act has come. Black Veterans Project unequivocally supports H.R. 8607, VA's Housing Loan Forever Act, and its aim to amend Title 38 of the United States Code to make certain legatees of certain veterans eligible for housing loans guaranteed by the Secretary of Veteran Affairs and for other purposes. A 2021 Brandeis University study found that Black veterans of World War II were obstructed from accessing the GI Bill and were denied approximately $80,000 in wealth-generating benefits between 1945 and 1956, worth nearly $70 billion today. We encourage further exploration of how H.R. 8607 can become law to redress that harm while maintaining a provision for utilization by multiple descendants. A preliminary analysis by the Center for Responsible Lending in 2022 showed that expanding the VA housing loan pool would be revenue generating, boost the housing market, and have a net positive impact on reducing housing insecurity for military families. We implore removing any undue burdens on military families seeking redress by placing minimal barriers to accessibility in the bill's final form. This bill must extend good faith to descendants who meet credit income standards and to qualify for access to the VA housing loan program. Lastly, I would be remiss not to address how continued discrimination in lending persists today, evidenced by the CNN investigation into the practices of Navy Federal Credit Union and its home loan program late last year, whereby more than half of its Black applicants were denied access to home loans. Greater oversight and accountability are needed to ensure that all financial institutions participating in the Department of Veteran Affairs VA Home Loan Program provide equitable access and are held accountable for patterns of discrimination in lending. Audits of major lenders participating in VA home loan programs and penalties for bad actors must be implemented if we want to avoid repeating the sins of our past. Ensuring all veterans and military families have equitable access to sustainable upward mobility is the responsibility of all Americans, but particularly this subcommittee. Black Veterans Project appreciates the opportunity to express our views, and we look forward to working closely with you and all the staff members as this measure advances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brookshire. Mr. Brookshire's testimony will be entered into the hearing record. In accordance with the committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Davis from North Carolina be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Hearing no objection, we will proceed. I now recognize Ranking Member 11 for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Neill, thank you so much for your kind words. Earlier this year, as you mentioned, we reintroduced the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act. It's a very important bill to me. The GI Bill has allowed millions of veterans to pursue a higher education and find rewarding career paths. Service members consistently cite GI Bill benefits as one of the top reasons they choose to serve in our armed forces, given the opportunities those benefits provide for them and their families. However, our Guard and Reserve members only accrue benefits in very limited circumstances. My bill would expand eligibility for the post-9/11 GI Bill to count every day that a service member is paid and in uniform toward benefit eligibility in order to achieve parity for National Guard and Reserve members. Mr. O'Neill, how would this impact your membership?
Thank you for the question. I think it would greatly impact our membership. This is something we've been focusing on for years. We have a resolution in place that supports GI Bill parity. Our 1.6 million members agree that this is something that should happen. And like I said, I think this would greatly impact membership in a positive way.
Terrific. I agree with you, and I think all service members, no matter whether they serve in the active or reserve components, deserve benefits for doing their jobs and risking their lives. I look forward to working with the chair to get this bill across the finish line this Congress, at least I hope. Mr. Brookshire, I'll turn to you. Thank you for your testimony as well. The Home Loan Guarantee Program is one of the best known and most widely used veterans benefits. Ms. Brookshire, in your testimony, you referenced the impact of redlining. For the benefit of our committee, can you further explain how a veteran was unable to use their home loan benefit due to redlining?
So Black veterans weren't unable to use their home loans with respect to redlining, in part because policies were put in place by the FHA that essentially made it very difficult to get their homes insured in particular areas, and it made it nearly impossible to receive home loans from banks because of it. And so that essentially was a policy that disabled many, many Black families from being able to access the benefit.
Got it. So it had the same effect, just slightly different. Can you explain how the VA Housing Loan Forever Act will attempt to address racial inequities faced by veterans from marginalized groups in accessing their earned GI Bill home loan benefits?
So this would enable families and descendants, spouses, to be able to utilize a benefit that was earned and hadn't been utilized. So it would give them access to the VA home loan benefit. It's a pretty standard, straightforward.
Very good. Anything else that you want to mention about this issue?
Yeah, I would like to say that, obviously this bill would be very important to Black vets, but I think it would affect all veterans. Only 4.3 million of returning GIs used the benefit. There were almost 16 million folks who served, and so this would benefit Hispanic vets, this would benefit white vets who weren't able to use the loan for whatever reason, and obviously this is very important to Black veterans as well.
Very much appreciate your comments. Thank you all for your testimony, and look forward to working with you all to get these bills across the finish line. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I've already told Rep. Davis that he might get a treat. Well, no, just kidding. Thank you again, Chairman. Just really grateful for your work and Ranking Member Levin's work here, particularly as we're talking about an issue that's so important to me, and that's ending homelessness. Folks, as we know, our veterans continue to be at risk and currently are experiencing homelessness. That's why this hearing is so important, and making sure that we're providing every possible VA resource to our at-risk veterans is crucial. Doing the work that I've done addressing issues of homelessness, I know that it costs 3-4 times more to be able to help someone once they're experiencing homelessness than it is to prevent it. So, Mr. Bearfield, can you tell me how the End Veteran Homeless Act will enable case managers, the folks that are providing those support services, to help homeless veterans with wraparound services like health care, like mental health treatment, and substance use disorder counseling?
Thank you for the question. Those case managers would be able to intervene with homeless veterans who need those services that you just mentioned, health care, mental health services, and substance use disorder. Some homeless veterans have those ailments or have that need for health care, and they don't have a way to connect with VA medical centers or the CBOCs in their area. So those case managers would prove to be very important by connecting them with VA services that they can use and get connected with to help get them out of the situations that they're in.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Bearfield. And obviously, as we think about it, housing is a need, but there are other needs as well. And sometimes homelessness is a symptom of other issues. So I absolutely believe and have actually supervised many case managers that do wraparound services. So I absolutely agree with you. I want to talk to you about homeless women veterans. Particularly this legislation, how do you see, Mr. Bearfield, it assisting women veterans that may have a child or children also in need of assistance?
Thank you for that question as well. Women veterans, especially those with children that may find themselves being homeless, would definitely benefit from case managers being able to connect them with not only the HUD vouchers that they would need to remove them from the situation that they're in, but the wraparound services, again, would also be able to provide them with other needs that they would have for themselves and for their children.
Thank you. I want to turn it over and talk a little bit now with Mr. Brookshire. First, just thank you so much for being here. And I really appreciated hearing from you and your testimony and what it means today to do the work that we must do, particularly on reparations for so many of our Black veterans who have seen the challenges of disparity and continue to see them. And we know that veterans of color, specifically Black and Latino veterans, are disproportionately impacted by unsheltered homelessness. Look, there is no reason any veteran, regardless of race, regardless of gender, should experience homelessness. And I think that we're all clear that we must always be aware of how there are still racist policies like redlining and segregation that feed into the cycles of homelessness and poverty. So, Mr. Brookshire, can you explain how the VA Housing Loan Forever Act would begin to redress veterans who did not receive housing benefits during the implementation of the GI Bill? You started talking a little bit about it in your testimony, but I'd be interested in hearing more.
So one, I think it's a matter of restoring dignity to military families, Black military families specifically, who were denied a benefit for generations. I think second, it would also help to boost homeownership in the Black community. I believe the Center for Responsible Lending did a study in 2022 that showed that I think somewhere around 12 million potential descendants are descended from World War II veterans. And so that would obviously be a large pool. I think they recommended that the program be shaped around first-time home buyers. And so obviously all of those things need to be considered in the crafting of the bill as it moves forward. But for me, it's about, one, restoring dignity. I mean, second, acknowledging a historical wrong that occurred when this second greatest policy was put in place by this committee. And also offering a pathway to homeownership for a community that is still facing a lot of challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Brookshire. I had another question, but I'll wait. If there's another round, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. The chair now recognizes my great friend, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Well, good afternoon. Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Levin. It's an honor to appear before you, and I must say a treat. This is a very distinguished subcommittee that's taking on awesome and incredible work. And I want to personally thank you for keeping up the fight for every single day, for our nation's veterans, and especially the 46,000 veterans in North Carolina's 1st Congressional District, which more than 15,000 were or are currently enrolled in an educational program. H.R. 8627, the Student Veteran Debt Relief Act of 2024, will allow veterans who have decided to continue their education after serving our country to remain enrolled in education programs at educational institutions across the country while they respond to a student loan overpayment. Our veterans should never have to worry about their educational future if a review determines they received a student loan overpayment due to a fault that has nothing to do with them. The Student Veteran Debt Relief Act will ensure that our nation's veterans take responsibility in paying back student loan overpayments without compromising their financial well-being or their education. No veteran should have to worry about their degree or certificate, that they're going to be delayed because of a student loan overdue payment. We must ensure morale remains high, and thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to direct my question today to Mr. Bearfield. And my question is, how might the Student Veteran Debt Relief Act help to collect loan overpayments in a timely fashion while preventing veterans from facing the hardship of disenrollment from their educational institution?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Davis. This legislation, one, would squarely put the responsibility on the VA for creating a debt that the veteran had no intended or no intentions of or no way of knowing about. The VA puts the responsibility on the veteran to make sure that they know classes are being paid for, that enrollment has been taken care of. So a lot of this bill would relieve a lot of that pressure off of the veteran to make sure that they know that something that they did not create or cause will not be a burden on them from completing their education.
Again, I believe we need to continue to do everything we can to help our veterans along the way. This is legislation that we have enormous interest in. I urge support, and I want to thank the opportunity to come before the subcommittee today. And I would always thank all of our veterans who continue to fight for other veterans across the nation. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you, my friend in the chair and the ranking member.
Mr.
I yield
Davis,
back.
thank you. And in fact, Mr. Ramirez was being truthful. This is some fantastic Vern's Wisconsin beer cheddar, and it's for you. Tell your friends they want to come to the subcommittee. There's absolutely treats awaiting for you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. O'Neill, I'm alive today because there's 50 Pennsylvania National Guard dudes helping protect me and the person that became the first democratically elected prime minister of Iraq. His name's Ibrahim al-Jafri. And I had those cats, and they were our second ring of security. The last 3 service members that were killed in action were killed in Jordan. They were reservists. What they didn't really widely publish is that there's a tremendous amount of National Guardsmen that were injured during that same attack. The enemy doesn't care if you're a reservist. They don't care if you're a National Guardsman. They're not aiming at your title. They're aiming at the American flag on your shoulder. And we would be wise to remember that collectively as a nation. So this is a thing that, this particular issue, that you have very broad bipartisan support. And we will continue to work for parity. And we got to get down to the brass tacks, nuts and bolts, and figure out how to do it properly. But again, I don't care if you're a reservist. I don't care if you're a National Guardsman. I want to make sure that the benefits that you have earned through your service are granted to you at the commensurate level. Ms. Kreuziger-Powell, how many people would you have on your staff to service 40 to 60,000 home loans?
Currently for us, we have about a $7 billion portfolio, which is about 40,000 units, and it's between 40 and 45 employees to service that portfolio. Okay.
And that's in the tune of about $16 billion?
For us, it's $7 billion. We have really low loan amounts, but it's when you're servicing units matter, and so 40,000 loans is what we service.
Okay. And what is the level of subject matter expertise with your people that are servicing these loans?
There's multiple departments and extreme levels of expertise, specifically in the loss mitigation field.
How long does it normally take someone to gain the commensurate amount of expertise to make sure that they can run these books at a low level of failure?
There's multiple layers, but if you're truly running the department, I would say several years of experience.
Okay. So it's not a pickup game, right? You don't just like roll in on Monday and then on Tuesday you're servicing loans to the tune of $16 billion. And 60,000 loans?
No, sir.
Okay. So the problem is we have some people that don't quite understand that. And I think that they're treading into waters and they don't know what they're doing. So that is an issue. So, Mr. Brookshire, my colleague, Mr. Clyburn, came to my office a little while ago and brought up this issue to me. And he did that because both of my parents were freedom riders in the 60s. They left from Mankato State. They went down to register African Americans to vote. And so this is part of my family's DNA, trying to rectify these things and making sure that we're not discriminating against people due to immutable characteristics such as race, sex, and all that stuff. But I have some questions because, again, we gotta nail this. You know what I mean? So how many potential folks are you talking about that would be eligible for this program?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's part of the reason that we've presented the bill now, is so that we can start to get answers and get a CBO score.
Okay. What if the person who was given access to a veteran's home loan guarantee wants to purchase an additional home?
Again, I wouldn't know the answer to that question because the bill is still in draft form.
Okay. So here's the VA, and this is gonna sound crazy, and I see Mr. Rodriguez over there, he's probably gonna have a heart attack. I agree with them in their assessment, a lot of stuff. I mean, you wanna write that one down, Mike? So what my concerns are is that we do need to have things definable. And what is definable is, and it's irrefutable, is that many Black Americans during that period of time in our history were discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. No one is arguing that at all. That happened, that's real. And if we can rectify something, we should. My concern is that until we are able to clearly define numbers, we can't understand the cost and we can't understand how to appropriately apply this. So for instance, the way that this is currently written, it's not compatible with how a active duty service member's eligibility for VA home loan guarantee is. So like I can use it, but I can't transfer it. My educational benefits, I can transfer to my wife and to a child. I can't give it to my grandchild or a cousin or any living descendant. So I would like these things, these programs, if we could have some type of standardization across the board, and if we use an existing model like the GI Bill, which I think would be prudent, then a significant portion of the people that are potentially identified in this bill as written would no longer be eligible for it. And I've had these discussions with Mr. Clyburn, and I'm going to continue to work with him to get this down to something that we can truly quantify. And here's how I've decided to legislate. If it makes sense, we're going to do it. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to ask questions. Right now, it doesn't make sense. That's why I'm asking questions, and I'll speak to my colleague, Mr. Clyburn, again. And then if we can get to yes with those answers, then we do it. And I don't care what the CBO score is. I don't care what your political party affiliation is. I don't care. If it makes sense, it makes sense. And if we have the opportunity from the subcommittee to help rectify a historic wrong, then that's what we're going to do. So I want you to stay in very close contact with our teams, and let's see if we can get to yes.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Well, with that said, they're going to call votes here shortly. Are you sure, Mr. Ramirez? So Ms. Ramirez will submit her questions, her follow-on question for the record. And I want to thank you, everyone. I'm going to recognize Ranking Member Levin for any concluding remarks you might have.
I just want to thank the chairman for his cooperation in so many of these important bills, and thank our witnesses for all their hard work, and hopefully we get a lot done in the next few months here.
Hopefully. I want to thank you guys for coming and for your participation in today's hearing. I've received a number of statements for the record. I've read them all. I make a habit of doing that before we sit down here and talk. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is adjourned.
Doug's really good.
It is excellent.